I'm not going to be here.
John showed up.
John here once.
He's not coming.
Other John.
Oh, sorry, John Eastwood. Yeah.
Oh, Johnny.
Sorry.
I was wondering,
That's who
like,
I meant.
are they razzing?
On my word.
John.
DJE.
Where's my? John the Great. You hear John the Greater? Where's John the Lesson?
Both are equal.
I'll report.
She's it. Okay. You good to go? Going to call this meeting to order of the Lexington Planning Commission on October 12th, 2023 at 5:01 PM in the Rockbridge County Administrative Offices. We have Gladys Hopkins and John Eastwood not in attendance this evening. First order of business, second order of business is the approval of the agenda. Are we all good with the agenda?
I move that we approve the agenda as presented.
Since I've been away, I'll second.
Second, any discussion? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? None. Okay, second, next order of business, approval of the minutes from the September 28th meeting. Do we have anything that needs added, corrected, tweaked? No? Okay. Do we have a motion?
I move to approve the minutes as presented.
I second.
Second, okay, we got a motion and a second. And typically with, even if you were not here, we allow, if you feel comfortable, if you've read the minutes and so forth, you feel free to vote on it. All in favor of accepting the minutes as presented, say aye. Aye. All opposed? All right, carries unanimously. We will now open up the floor to citizens' comments on matters that are not on this evening's agenda. No one rushing forward to get something off their chest. All right, we will close citizens' comments and move on to our first new order of business, which is an entrance corridor certificate of appropriateness 2023-05, which is an application by Gia Delgado for a certificate of appropriateness for new signage for the Lewis scale at 539 East Nelson Street, tax map number 30-7-9, owned by 539 East Nelson Street LLC. Staff report, Marty. Good evening to you all. We do have an entrance corridor request that includes signage. In particular, it includes the request for one existing monument sign. The panels were replaced or refaced on that, and two existing wall signs were refaced. And then we also have a proposal for a new monument sign that would be up front, meaning up front along East Nelson Street. And the size of that sign would be 96 inches by 75 inches. The monument sign will feature two backlit 86 by 44 inch acrylic panels with a Lewis scale branding on a white background mounted on a blue aluminum base featuring the address in white text. You see the location map on the bottom of the page. And just for reference, there is a monument sign along Walker Street that we'll see a picture of. And there's also an entrance that's actually facing more towards the Truist Bank than towards any of the other public facades or faces. And then it's hard to see on there, but there's a grass or green strip in the shadow of that building where the proposed freestanding monument style sign would go. If you flip over the next page, you do see sort of photo simulation where the grass is nice and green and that great big hole is no longer in front of the building. But the proposed monument sign, I presume, is going to go pretty much where that temporary posted sign that you see there with the white posts, and maybe the applicant can confirm when she comes up for her comments that it will actually go in that location. The signs do meet sign requirements as far as zoning, and over on page 8, because it is in an entrance corridor, what you're asked to grade this by are three standards. And the first is each panel shall have an overall sign plan that each parcel shall have an overall sign plan which reflects a consistent style and specifies the size and color scheme for proposed signage. The second is materials used in signs and their support structures should reflect the building served by the sign. And the third standard is sign colors should be harmonious with the building which they serve.
Staff does make a recommendation in favor simply because it meets the zoning criteria. As an example, we don't have the main entrance corridor items in front of you, but for our historic district, I normally say it meets the criteria in the zoning, and I'll let the architectural board make decisions over sort of the aesthetic features. So recommendation in favor from staff, mainly based on the fact that it meets the zoning criteria. If you flip over to page 12 of your packet, you'll see the diagrams or the sketches or schematics for the Lewis Gale sign that would be up front. Again, up front meaning along East Nelson Street. This is the new sign that's being proposed.
I'm sorry, which, you're talking about the one on the ground? Ground sign, not, okay. Just making sure.
Yeah, okay. Freestanding sign up front, which is ground mounted, which is a monument style sign as well.
Yeah.
They did a while ago, months ago, 6 months or so ago, had a proposal for a large wall sign along East Nelson Street, but that's no longer part of the proposal. So the only new sign is this ground mounted monument style sign along East Nelson Street. And then if you look over existing signs that have already been installed without your review and approval, over on page 16, there are two signs above the doors, and those cabinets were already there. So those were just refaced. And then the other one over on page 19 is the monument style sign, ground mounted, that is along the entrance from Walker Street. And again, that sign was existing. The panels were just replaced. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Arnie? Okay. We would invite the applicant to make a statement if she so chooses. Thanks. Come on forward and please state your name and address for the record.
I'm Gia Delgado. I'm from Budget Signs at 3148 Williamson Road, Roanoke, Virginia.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks. I did want to verify that it is on the location that you had stated. Okay. And also I did want to confirm that we did conform as far as the color into something that would be more in line with the more cohesive with what is there. And we conform to the Lewis scale blue, which we do have in the diagram as the PMS 6654C blue. And there will be no extra light emanating onto East Nelson Street. It is a facelit sign.
I'm sorry, it is a.
Facelit
Face-
sign. There's
yeah.
no extra.
Anything else? All right.
I have a little
Sure.
question.
Yeah.
Maybe it's here and I just
Okay.
haven't come across it. Where does it indicate how high off the ground it is,
Let's see.
please?
It is 75 inches from grade to the top of the sign.
Okay, I see that now.
Yes, ma'am.
From grade to the top of the sign.
Yes, ma'am.
Are the lights on a timer or do they just stay on?
We usually
Photo-
put them on a photo cell.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So they're on all night.
Well, they would be on all night until the light come on the photo cell would turn the lights off.
So this might be a question for Arnie, but it doesn't seem like this would go with our night sky ordinance.
That would apply to lighting fixtures where this is a sign. So the night sky light below horizontal plane requirements are again for lighting fixtures and not for signage.
Mm,
We have some other language in here that it shall not be so bright as that it blinds folks passing by traffic or residential not neighborhoods, but buildings. But that dark sky would not be applicable to a sign.
So this is the sign, correct?
Yes,
The, so what is this, what is the blue made out of?
Aluminum,
I'm sorry,
aluminum.
aluminum. And sorry, I've got. So I know that one of the things that is required is that it sort of speak to the building, which I think this sign, this is the one on Walker Street.
Mhm.
So I would say that this sort of has more to do with the building. Architecturally, you know, it's brick, the building's brick, than this does. And I guess I would wonder what other commissioners think. Since this is an entrance corridor and it's something that I know that past planning commissions in Lexington spent a lot of time working on that entrance corridor ordinance. And so I am concerned that we make sure that we maintain a visually pleasing entrance corridor.
Mhm.
And I guess I would say that this does not necessarily the sign with the brick on it, the existing sign sort of feels like it has a little bit more in common with the other signs that are along the entrance, along that entrance corridor. Does anybody else have any thoughts about that?
Well, so should we save that for our discussion then, I think, right? So this is
Great.
informational right now, right? So in other words, so the question is then, with that sign, would it be like the one in the picture with two white posts holding it up? Or how is this sign, like we're looking, the one in our picture, it's got two white posts, right? Holding the sign. How would this one look there?
That is the temporary
Yes.
location or the temporary sign. So it's the location, but if you go over to page 12, that is the diagram or the graphic for the proposed sign.
So it would just be sitting on the ground, or would it be?
No, we
It-
proposed a tree monument, which is on the ground.
I'm sorry, a true monument?
Yeah.
Monument style sign is a sign that has the base that's as wide as the sign itself.
I
So
see.
instead of being a pole mounted sign
Right,
with the board in between and some
right, right.
light and air
Right,
underneath it. This is a sign that has the base, so
I
it goes
see.
all the way down to the ground, more of as a solid
Right,
monumental
Right.
type.
okay. Okay, good.
And-
All right. yeah, I
And
got
do you have a mock-up that shows the sign with this building, like from an angle, so that we would be able to see sort of what it looks like? I mean, it's very hard to see what the sign would look like from this picture where the sign is
We
very
have,
thin.
we have the mock-up and then we have that as a location.
Right, I'm just wondering if you have a mock-up in situ, like with a picture taken from an angle of the building so that we could see what it would look like on, up against the building.
I don't have that at the moment. I mean, I can certainly get that if you need that. I do have something that might help, but it doesn't. It's not far away. It's not way back.
Well, this is definitely, is this to scale?
No, it's
Okay. I think it would be helpful to me anyway to see,
further back.
yes, from further back, so you can actually see the whole building and see where that sign to scale.
No, I can see that.
Gia, can we see what you have?
So it'd be 6 feet, 75 inches high, you said, right? So that's a little over 6 feet. And then how high is the tan foundation of the building itself? You know, if you're standing next to the building, how high up would it go on the, I think that's kind of what you're getting at is, yeah, like.
I
how
actually
high-
don't, not just that, I really would like to see it.
So something that is not this close up, but further back.
Yeah,
To scale with the brick.
With the brick to see how high, you know, are the windows 6 feet high, the window sills, or right to see where,
right. And how far back from the street would the sign be? would also, just sort of like exactly where you would be placing it.
Yeah, it would definitely meet that. But I see what you're saying, the proof that shows the setback in relation to the building.
And the size of the sign in relation to the building so that we can sort of get a sense for what it would look like up against that building. But I do still think that there might be some concerns about architecturally, having it go along with the entrance corridor look.
Okay, are there any other, say, informational questions we need? And then we can kind of move from there. Okay, good. So thank you very much. I guess in the course of our discussion, we can always come back to you and ask if we, in the
Right.
course of our discussion. Good.
Always.
Thank you.
Always.
Okay. Now we would open up for public comment. If anyone would like to speak to this matter, this stranger coming forward, would you please state your name and address?
Lee Merrill, 2 South Randolph Street. I was the architect on the building of this, so I have some comments that are in line with what you're talking about. And I applaud the Planning Commission for taking on the role of the TCO or the ARB for the TCO, because I think they really need a monument sign out there. The reason there wasn't one in the first place is that building was built as adjunct to the bank building. It was the Bank of Rockbridge, and the signage was going to be in the gables in the drive-it saying Rockbridge, no bank name, but it didn't fly, and thankfully not. Apparently wasn't appropriate, but the brick pedestals were established as a cohesive gesture throughout that whole district there. And so this idea of it not being on a brick pedestal, I think, is a missed opportunity by the tenants of the building currently. And I'm sure that they might reflect on this and do it, because the building needs signage on Nelson Street. The situation is good. I'm glad you're asking for an image that shows what it would look like there, because I think they'll get their graphics the right scale, et cetera. So I'm supportive of the project, getting signage there. I didn't come here having glanced at the package, which I was glad to have. I hadn't realized that that was a missed opportunity, and thanks for pointing it out. I hope the Planning Commission will encourage the applicants to look at that. Thank you.
Thanks, Lee. Okay. Any other public comment? Okay, I will close public comment on that, and we can now talk about this among ourselves. Also, I guess one question I actually have about where the signs, existing sign, these are existing signs over the 2 doors. Where are they on this building? What are they facing? They're not on Nelson Street, right?
There's an entranceway that comes in that's closer to the Truist Bank. So you see the L in Lewis Gale on, on page.
Yeah, so they're on that corner of the
on
building.
L there where the 2 sidewalks sort of come together.
Right.
If you see the sidewalks
Right.
converging on that corner,
Okay,
that corner has those 2 signs.
right.
above.
And so so on the door facing Nelson Street there's no sign over that, right?
Correct.
And there's no other signage on the building now or being proposed, right? So this is the one thing. Okay.
It's only the monument sign that
Only the
would be
monument sign.
readily seen from East Nelson Street. The proposed sign.
Yeah. Okay. So would anyone else, or Shannon, would you like to speak to their point, or would anyone else like to?
I'm just gonna to continue on the corridor, and interesting to know. I did not know that the brick pedestal was what was sort of tying them all together, but I do think that would help a lot with this particular sign. So if the blue was actually brick instead of blue aluminum, I think that would make it cohesive with the rest of the signs that are in that corridor.
Brick around that.
Yeah, so yeah, that's good. Thanks, Kate. Yeah, just so it's for the record and people can hear if they're listening in. Thank you.
What if we had proposed, like, not really landscaping, but a brick around that bottom of the monument?
I would probably have to see what that looked like. I'm not quite sure what you mean by brick around the bottom.
So where it wouldn't be changing the sign itself, it would just be bordering it.
I do have to say, there are signs on Nelson Street with brick, there's one back here that does not have it. I personally don't even like the brick on that one, and I do like the blue. So I actually like it how it's designed. It would be nice to see how the scale. But I've also been by that building. That's a pretty high up, the elevation till you reach the windows. So I think it's gonna be visible and it'll look nice. So I really don't have an issue with it as proposed.
Which other buildings can we think of which other businesses have this style, the style with the brick foundation
This is
to
the
it?
only one I can think of.
Ranks
off-
does
yeah.
what? Pardon me?
Yeah, this.
Oh, and that's on the Walker Street side, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
Lee,
yeah, if you're gonna, yeah,
don't mind,
yeah.
otherwise we're not gonna be able to catch it. If I'm not mistaken, the Wendy's has one.
Yeah.
I want to say the CVS has a brick base. I think a lot of them actually do.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, and this one has one, and the one we're seeing in the picture is on, I recognize it on Walker Street, right?
Right.
Okay,
And I don't think that it has to look like this.
Yes, ma'am.
I mean, I like the sort of the L shape around Lewis scale. I think that's aesthetically pleasing. I just would like to have that cohesiveness to the entrance corridor. And signage is something that is, it's very obvious. People are looking at them, and particularly since it's going to be lit. I think, yeah, that's sort of where I sit with it.
John or Mary Stewart? You,
I mean, one option is we could ask them to come back and give us a visual what it would like in brick. I prefer the brick myself. And, we've had lots of discussions about signs, and yes, it may not seem like a big deal, but lots of little signs end up to a look
Mhm.
along the corridor. So if we can have some consistency, I think it would be good. So looking at the option of substituting or adding brick somehow that ties it to the building. And then as an aside, the brick that's there now on the Walker Street side, obviously that needs to, well, that's a maintenance issue, not a zoning.
And that is part of an issue though, is thinking about maintenance, because I know I have a brick wall and that is what happens to it. So, and it's, if you're going to build a brick wall now, after the building's been there 25 years, 30, it's tough to match up brick. And it's not going to match your building necessarily.
Oh, I bet you could get some brick that would be close though. And it might not be an exact match, but I don't know that that's the critical piece. I think it's the cohesiveness of having a piece that your eye, as you're driving down the street, you're like, oh, this is an area, right? This is an area. And I can tell that because there is something that joins all that these all have in common. And it, in this case, is brick. So
Mary Stewart, you want to add?
The only, I would echo that some sort of a brick border would be very, appropriate. That's all. Whether it's sitting up or, I don't think it has to be, raised up, but some sort of a brick border.
We could do a brick border. Not the whole bottom of the sign is not really what we were proposing. But a brick border would be doable.
I wonder if maybe you could come back with maybe more than one option, like a couple of options that include brick.
As I think
What we do.
yeah, I think when we've talked about signage on, say on where there's a little strip mall where the signs are going to be of a different style because there isn't an overall scheme because it's not all owned by the same company and it wasn't built together. But I think here, at least on this parcel, having at least on that parcel itself being consistent since the other freestanding sign kind of has that kind of brick design, I think going the consistency element of it in front and then being consistent with the other businesses is something I would lean towards wanting to see. And so not that it has to be exactly like the one that's on Walker Street, but one that is consistent. I kind of would like to see other kind of options as well.
I happen to have for not related reasons, I have the comp plan open to for the implementation section of the plan. Section implementation number TR 3.2 says develop streetscape standards for entrance corridors such as East and West Nelson Street and North and South Main Street. So I think that that's exactly, the sort of thing that we're talking about is having a standard for what these signs look like.
But you're not saying that it has to be totally brick on the bottom.
I'm saying that it might be good to take a look at all the other signs that are there and sort of say, okay, how can I make my sign look like it's, related to these other signs, not the Lewis Gale physicians section of the sign, but the base of the sign. How can I make that look like it belongs on this strip?
Okay. Because the design of the sign, we want it to remain the same, if at all possible.
I hear you. And I also, I think that it's fair to say that, we also want the streetscape to.
But I think we could come to a compromise and do a brick border or something along those lines, a couple options, like you said.
We did get into this discussion back when we were doing KFC, and
I was wondering about
I
that.
can't remember if Pat
That
and
was-
John were here, but we did discuss that allowing a business to keep their branding to some extent is important and not to totally change it. And that's what I'm kind of concerned that they have a color scheme for a reason that fits with the building.
Mhm.
I'm very thankful you didn't put the sign on the building, which is allowed in our regulations. And I do like having the street sign. I think it's visible and looks nice. I hesitate to start asking them for too much, and it is a major design change to then put it on a pedestal, a brick pedestal, rather than having it mounted on the ground.
I don't think we're talking about changing anything on the sign itself in terms of the design or color
That's what I
scheme or
want to
logo.
confirm.
I don't think that's the question at all, right?
Right. Is this is the sign?
With
But-
the blue too, I think is what they want.
Well, so all of the other, none of the other signs have that blue in terms of the branding. This is what's on
In the
three
sign.
of the signs.
Right. I mean, the blue,
Just have the white.
the blue
with
can still
black
be part of
border.
the brand, it can still be part of the sign. There's no reason why you can't kind of have that L outlining of it. That I don't think that's what we're talking about in terms of getting it to be cohesive. I think it's
It
it's the
needs
brick
to
element, I
incorporate
think,
some
and the that it's not consistent with this sign. It's already the freestanding sign. It's already there on Walker Street. And doesn't seem to be consistent with the other businesses, some of the other businesses there, I think. But so I don't think it's what's on the face of the sign. Or even having a blue outlining of it in some way that you have there, that kind of, it's not that. I think it's just how the whole thing is.
And you don't want
presented.
that sign removed.
No,
The one on Walker Street, I don't think,
why would we?
no, I don't, I
Well,
mean,
I'm
that's,
just saying if it was cohesive, if that was the one sign that is keeping it from being cohesive.
well, I think it's still a question of with the other businesses on
Yeah.
Nelson Street as
Okay.
well. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So, I think should we take kind of a straw poll and see whether we want to kind of formally ask to see more options, or in other words, how strongly do we feel about this? Would we say we want more options?
I'd like to see more options that include brick.
Are you kind of yes or no on that? Down, no?
I think it's worthwhile. Yeah.
Okay. John, okay, so I think what we're gonna, our informal straw poll here suggests that we're gonna ask for more options that can try to get something that's more in line with the surrounding areas in terms of that aesthetic along the lines of what we talked about.
Okay.
Have we given you enough to go on?
You have.
Okay. Okay, so Now, so procedurally, what do we have to do? Do we continue this? So it doesn't have to be advertised again, or how do we do this?
I was getting ready to say that we need to have a vote to
Okay.
defer it, but then I realized that entrance corridor is not an item that is an ad in the paper, so we haven't really posted anything, done Jason property owner notices. So you really don't have to. I think direction has been given.
Okay.
Gee, if you get something to us by next Thursday at the end of the day or Friday in the morning, then we can have it ready for the next available planning commission meeting. Otherwise, if you don't have anything to us in the next week, then it's going to be another couple of weeks before you're back in front of the planning
What is the
commission.
deadline date? Date?
Next Friday morning, which is the
20th.
20th is what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
But you have basically a week if you want it on the next available
I do.
meeting, which is 2 weeks from now.
Okay. Well, then, thank you very much. And then we look forward to seeing you again in more
Thank
options.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so we've rounded that off now. We're going to get to the second order of new business, which is zoning ordinance amendment 2023-01. Annual zoning ordinance amendments, accessory dwelling units. This looks like an interesting topic. What do you have to say about it in a staff report, Artie?
It's news to me. We have been working, or sorry, I should back up a little bit. In 2017, the zoning ordinance update included accessory apartments for the first time. We had other things such as transient accommodations and tourist homes and other things, but the first time we actually had accessory apartments show up is in the 2016-2017 update. And that allowed the accessory dwelling to be or accessory apartment to be within the main building, and it had some size requirements, maximums. And then in the 2020 comp plan, they introduced the idea in the strategy HO 1.2 to review regulations allowing accessory dwelling units in separate structures in appropriate residential areas. So that's what we're doing. We're following the comp plan and have started this amendment as part of, believe it or not, the 2021 annual zoning ordinance amendment, where we started with 15 or so housekeeping items, then we went to the small cells, then we did the plan unit developments. Now we're in the third, the larger item of that, accessory dwelling units, and then we had committed to doing cottage housing next. So as part of this, we started in January this year and have been working on the different elements. We followed outline that focuses on the specific elements of the plan, and we weighted our way through that. Got to a point in the summer where we had a draft. We've been tweaking that draft since the summer, end of summer. And now we have advertised this for a public hearing certainly had public comment on this many times, but this is the first full advertised public comment period for this item. And again, this is about accessory dwelling units, specifically in accessory structures, but we're also going back and tweaking what was allowed in accessory apartments and specifically in accessory dwelling units that are attached as well as detached. We also, unfortunately, when you read through the document over and over, you keep finding little tweaks. So I have 3 tweaks for you that we'll get to in just a minute. And then ultimately for your decision this evening is, have we done enough? And are you comfortable after hearing public comment? Would you like to make a recommendation to send it along with some tweaks or as is to city council? Do you want to hold off on it for a little bit? Maybe the few things that I mentioned, you might want to review a little bit. Maybe you want to defer it until the next meeting for your final consideration. So that's what I'm sort of looking for is at the end of the discussion is whether or not you want to defer and consider it a little bit more, maybe make a few tweaks based on what you hear from the public, or is it ready to go to council? Any questions on the process?
Arnie, just to clarify, these are the tweaks?
That is one of the tweaks.
Okay. And the other ones are in the,
That's the one I'll back up. That is the one because of a comment that we received today from Heidi Schweitzer about sort of clarity of that item. And then I've got 3 other things to mention to you that are highlighted or underlined in your final draft, if we want to call it that.
Okay,
So should we work through them? And
so
is that what you'd like? Okay.
If you don't mind.
yeah,
Just to quickly go through on page 20, you've seen this a lot, the draft or the use matrix, and the only updates there are the conditional uses for the R1, R2, RM, RLC zoning districts for accessory dwelling units detached. And the lot requirements table, Kate did a good job of updating that to include some of the height requirements and the setback requirements that are a little bit different for the detached ones in particular. So that has been updated. And on page 23, the purpose statement, and this is maybe being a little bit too particular, but the purpose statement was rather choppy after the number of iterations that we had and amendments. So I just put together that second purpose statement. Doesn't change any meaning in it. Nothing's added, nothing's deleted. It's just changing the sentence structure a little bit to maybe make it read a little bit better.
When I read it today, Arnie, I had one question, because I don't want to mess with it. We worked on it enough. And but should it say previously established accessory apartments, or are we okay with just saying apartments? Small thing, then it could go either way.
I think the apartment is going to be an accessory, so I'm not really convinced that it's necessarily needed.
I think you don't need a hyphen between changing and family in the
Oh,
second
okay.
sentence.
I'll take your word for it because I don't know. Okay, we can get rid of that. Any other comment there? Okay with the proposed or the revised, or would you prefer the original?
The revised proposed, I think looks good. It reads
Yeah,
a little
I don't,
Yeah.
Yeah.
trying to compare words. They
think
look
so.
like
Yeah.
they're all there. on the
Yeah.
list.
I didn't try to change anything at all as far as content and try to delete or add. It's really the same, just slightly reformatted.
Okay.
So if you're okay with that, we'll
Yeah.
go forward with the revision
Yeah.
there.
Think so?
And then the next item that you see underlined in C1. So we're talking about general standards for accessory dwelling units subject to the following minimum standards. The first one says no more than one ADU shall be allowed per parcel. And I'm proposing for your consideration adding containing a primary dwelling. And the reason what brought me to that recommendation is thinking about some of the lots that we have and sort of the configuration. In particular, along Walker Street, since we're already in the Walker Street neighborhood, and along Miller Street, it was subdivided in such a way that there were lots of about 30 or 40 feet in width, and people would have purchased 2 and built a house on top of them, or 3 and built a house on top of 2 lots, and then the third lot's over by itself, or 4 lots, and you have a lot on each side. And apparently we didn't require the folks to combine all of the lots that they had purchased, if it would have been 2 or if it had been 3 or 4, into one main parcel. So people may have this idea that, okay, I can put this accessory on this separate lot over here. But the problem that we have is, and we've already brought the idea forward in C10, which says accessory dwelling units cannot be constructed without the primary dwelling existed on the parcel. So I'm just trying to bring that a little bit closer to the front to perhaps make it more obvious, a little bit more obvious, that if somebody has an extra parcel beside parcels where the house is actually located on, they cannot just go and ask for a conditional use permit to put the accessory detached on that parcel. So it's just a little bit of reconfiguring and maybe combining C1 and C10. So maybe we can get rid of C10. And
Very good.
good thing is that it's easy to remedy the situation. If I have a house on Walker Street and it's on 2 parcels and there's a third parcel over that was never combined, it's easy enough through a deed to go through and combine those things. And if we also change the subdivision code, as we will be proposing to you shortly, that would also be an administrative item. So it wouldn't take a full extra step of going through a preliminary subdivision to have the 3 parcels combined into one. It would just be an administrative item that then could be handled fairly quickly. And then they could still have the ability to put the accessory dwelling unit on that parcel of land, which is now combined into one larger main parcel, if that makes sense.
Is it because otherwise you could then basically end up with 2 accessory dwelling units on what looks like one property, but technically that's its own parcel?
It just
Yeah,
clarifies and cleans up
yeah.
and makes hopefully folks aware up front when they're reading this that you can have no more than one on the parcel that contains the
Yeah.
primary dwelling.
But it doesn't really say that. I don't,
Right.
I don't read that.
Yeah.
I would say, okay, well, I'm not putting it where the primary dwelling, I'm not putting it on the parcel where the primary dwelling is. I'm putting it on the next parcel.
Okay, then.
But then,
But you have
in
to-
other words, you would have to say the ADU can only be on a property containing a primary dwelling.
Which we have, don't we have in there somewhere?
That's.
Then we leave 10 in.
That's 10, yeah.
10 in and
Okay.
put it both
Yeah.
places.
Yeah, that's what 10 does, yeah. So we'll leave that into, yeah.
Otherwise,
Clarify.
yeah.
So I think a lot of us don't realize we might own more than one parcel. You know, what it looks like on the ground is not what it says on
Right.
the. Okay,
I wonder if this would clarify that, and it might be that just 10, keeping 10 is better, but no more than 1 ADU shall be allowed per parcel so long as the parcel contains a primary dwelling. And I'm not sure that doesn't maybe answer the issue that you, because I read it the same way. I was trying to sort of figure out how to make that clear that you have to have a primary dwelling unit on the parcel.
put 10 as number 1.
Right.
Let's put that right up front, right? Would that, I don't know if that messes up the flow of what
I think that makes sense.
put that first, right? It's just right off the bat, you've got to have a primary dwelling on in the first place.
Okay.
All right,
And then you leave number 1 as it was proposed to you today without my addition. And then,
but I
then we're
think, I
done.
don't think it hurts to keep the containing a
It's
primary.
hard to keep it,
Yeah.
especially if it helps you in any way
Yeah.
in the future, or
Yeah.
helps the future.
Yeah, I
planning.
think putting 10 first, then that's like, well, where can I put it? You know, well,
Max, that's
yeah.
one of the most important.
yeah,
part.
yeah. So
Okay.
rather than doing that as the finale, just,
Okay, if that's
and-
acceptable, we'll move
Yeah.
10 and then leave number 1 as it's shown with the additional language that's underlined.
yes,
Mhm.
yes.
And you could
Good.
even combine them in one
No.
number.
Then we'd have to wordsmith it.
No.
Can't you have 2 sentences?
There's if nothing else on that one, I'm going to move to C4. I realized after reading it once again that what we're trying to allow is an accessory dwelling unit that's attached or within a primary on a lot that is smaller than the minimum lot size. Perhaps we should also have considered minimum lot width, but provided that the primary dwelling is a legal non-conforming use, I realize it's really not the use that's so much important as the non-conforming lot size.
What does it mean? That's a lot of record.
Oh, I should clarify. A lot of record is something that was subdivided legally. So it met if there were any lot size and lot width requirements, that it met that when it was subdivided. So it's also another way of saying it's non-conforming. So I should say, we have quite a few lots in this city that are lots of record in the sense that they do not meet the minimum lot width or the minimum lot size because they were subdivided in many cases way before we even had a zoning ordinance. So then you could argue we in the 50s or so adopted a zoning ordinance with fairly arbitrary lot size and lot width requirements. So what we're trying to avoid or allow is an accessory dwelling on a lot that is less than the minimum lot size. And maybe we should also consider a minimum lot width. But we were saying, provided that it is a legal non-conforming use, but the use isn't really the issue. It's the non-conformity of the lot size itself and maybe even the lot width. So therefore, I would recommend that you consider adding, and provided the lot is a lot of record. Again, that means it was subdivided and created legally and in conformance with whatever the requirements were at that time for size, presumably, and width, presumably. This is a little bit bigger of a change for you to consider at this late date.
So
Why do you consider that a big change? That sounds
Well, it's
like.
bigger than the one before where we were just sort of trying to clarify.
Yeah.
Where this is also clarification, but it's it's a little bit more than wordsmithing.
It looks okay.
So Arnie, again, what would be I know you just explained it, but what would be the result of this, adding this?
What we're trying to allow here is an accessory dwelling unit could be added to a main structure, either within or attached to it. So we're not talking about detached at all. We're only talking about attached accessory dwelling unit. That can occur on a parcel that has less than the required parcel size and less than the required parcel width, provided that that lot was actually created before we had those width and lot size requirements. So it's just basically saying that we would allow it on a lot that is a non-conforming lot of record.
And then it would still have to conform to all of the other
Right,
requirements. that we-
Setbacks.
all the other
Setbacks.
stuff. That this is only talking about lot size, and I'm hoping we can add lot width to it because I think that's important. But correct, all the other stuff, it doesn't get you out of all the other things you just mentioned.
Yeah.
Those standards are still in here.
Even if you add lot width, that'd be fine because it still has to meet the setbacks. Yeah. I don't see a problem with that. I think it's a good.
Yeah,
Good
same.
Good. We good?
So to read that, as I would propose it, accessory dwelling units may be created within or attached to an existing primary dwelling located on a lot that is smaller than the minimum lot size and smaller than the minimum lot width, provided the primary dwelling is a legal non-conforming use and provided the lot is our lot of record.
I'm good with
Okay.
that.
I think we're good with that. Yes?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So before you move to the next underlined section, I'm wondering what is the difference between 1 and 7? Are ADUs? Well, yeah. In this context, so short-term rentals separate from ADUs? Okay,
An ADU
Yeah.
can be a
Can
long-term
be long-term,
rental,
yeah.
it can not be a rental, or it could be a short-term rental. But what we're trying to specifically say is per
Right.
parcel, you get one ADU. Per parcel, you get one short-term rental.
okay. So I know that short-term rentals are covered somewhere else, but you just wanted it to be here.
Yeah.
To be clear.
What-
Okay.
Correct, because I think when we had the discussion, we didn't want, not to say that investors are bad, but investors to come in, buy up a lot, create an accessory dwelling unit, rent both of them out, and potentially rent both of them out short-term.
Mhm.
Even though that
Thank
wouldn't
you.
be in
That's
accordance
fine.
with short-term rental rules and regulations, but so we were just trying to put some parameters and restrictions on how many accessory dwellings you can have and how many of those total units on the property can be for short-term rental.
Arnie, may I ask one question here on number 4? I'm still not clear on why we are making a note there that it is a lot of record. What would be a lot that was not of record? What would that, I can't even fathom what that would be.
A lot of record is, so in this case, you may be saying a lot of record is not the best way of saying it, but non-conforming versus conforming. So if it's conforming, it has the minimum lot width and the minimum lot size, then obviously you can do the accessory dwelling unit. But this is just saying, hey, if you have a lot that is a non-conforming lot of record, it was just created before we had these lot size and lot width requirements, fine, you still get to have the
Okay,
internal
okay,
ADU.
Okay.
Is that a better way of saying it?
Yeah, now I'm following where you're going. It wasn't clear. So, okay.
So this is providing an exception and we're just sort of clarifying
Okay.
what that exception is.
Okay.
And that's
Cool.
all for what I had, but we did have a comment from Heidi Schweitzer. She had come in yesterday looking for Steve. Then I didn't think until after she left, hey, she'd be a good person. 'Cause she's already been keeping up with ADUs to some degree because of one client in particular. And then she mentioned or asked in E1. So if we go over to E1, and E is the section that talks about accessory dwelling unit detached standards. And number one is where we're trying to put the floor area size, minimums, maximum percentage. We're trying to lay that out. So it says the gross floor area of a detached accessory dwelling unit may not exceed 60% of the gross floor area of the primary dwelling on the property, nor more than a total of 1,000 square feet. Notwithstanding the 60% requirement, a detached dwelling unit may be at least 600 feet in size, but may also be smaller at the property owner's discretion. That was a little bit wordy, and Heidi asked me, what does that mean? So I explained, oh, yeah, that makes sense. But she didn't get that, even being an architect, from reading the language that we had in E1. So Kate did a great job of taking a stab at it. So on the separate sheet of paper that you have, that upper portion is the existing that I just read. And the alternative is another way of doing this. So you split it up in so that it says the maximum gross floor area of a detached accessory dwelling unit shall be as follows. In A, if the gross floor area of the primary dwelling on the property exceeds 1,000 square feet, the gross floor area of a detached accessory dwelling unit may not exceed 60% of the gross floor area of the primary dwelling, nor more than 1,000 feet. And then in the second part, so we're really splitting up the sentence into
I
two
do too.
pieces,
I do
and it's also easier, I think, for people to find it and to follow it when they realize that it's two separate things.
Mhm.
And then the second part in B, if the gross floor area of the primary dwelling on the property is less than 1,000 square feet, the gross floor area of a detached accessory dwelling unit may not exceed 600 square feet. So that says you can at least get 600, which is that sort of floor. I'm going to call it the Mirabai exception that we were talking about. So, but it doesn't say that you have to do 600. You can do a lesser amount if you wanted to do a 450 square foot accessory. So that is the proposal because of the comment that came from Heidi Schweitzer.
I like that. I think it's much easier to follow.
I agree.
Yep. Okay, yeah, changes nothing substantively, but makes it easier to read. Okay,
So if everyone's okay, we would substitute that in for E1 that's in your packet. And that's all I have.
that's what you have. Okay. So, because we are still in the staff report section of this, right? Does anybody have a question for Arnie? Before we would move to public comment, before we move to discussion, anything that we need to know from him that you've,
Sorry, can you clarify? Because the other things that were underlined were changes, but in the definitions are all underlined, but those are,
Yeah, that's a little bit hard to explain, but as an example, accessory apartment obviously was taken out, and I'm now on I'm at page 25. Accessory building, because we had, I think in the last conversation, that oddity where it was building accessory and we wanted to make it a little bit more standard. So building accessory, which is struck out on page 26, is really now the new version for accessory building. And then accessory dwelling unit attached and accessory dwelling unit detached are new definitions. They are completely new. So in that case, we underline them. So it's a change in, so all of this in your thinking, why isn't everything underlined? But we just brought it forward that way, and it really perhaps didn't need to be. But we're trying to show folks that, accessory apartment is being deleted. So this is still a way of showing what's being deleted and what's being added.
got it. Thank you.
What you're getting at is just about everything in this section really requires underlining.
Gotcha.
good, thank you. Anything else, clarification for Arnie or? Okay, so let's open it up. That's the staff report. Let's open up for public comment. If anyone would like to rush up before Lee.
I just will add that I think.
Tell us your name again, just so
Email-
we know where you are, but yeah. Good.
The tweaks are all great. The thing is ready to go to the public hearing. I'm shocked that for the advertising that you did for today's public hearing, that there's nobody here. There's not one realtor. And that's the audience that now needs to look at this thing and decide, whoa, blah, blah, blah. How, besides just running the Gazette thing, can you get the realty community's attention so that they read this thing sooner than later? Is an option that I think you might want to explore. How to, who do you know in the realty community? Say, have you
Right.
read it?
Right.
Because I don't know why they're not here.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Often, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I was just gonna say, isn't this related to we can only advertise one week in advance now? So. Okay,
We were thinking that maybe because people may not follow your schedules and your agendas, that we did do some social media advertising as well to get that bigger audience.
You did do some social, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, my thought is, what we've hoped in the past, when we've had things we've been working on for months, that the people who would be interested would know that this is going on. I don't imagine we're gonna have realtors coming in saying, where did this come from? This is out of the blue. I think at this point, after 9 months, people would have seen, hopefully that's what it is. I think we've seen that before in some of our processes, which is great, where we've had things where people come all throughout the process, or we hear stuff, and then at the final hearing, we're like, okay, I think everybody who had a question. So hopefully when it goes to city council, they won't be coming forward saying, where is this coming from?
Yeah.
So hopefully that's the case and that people have seen it. So,
I'll reach out to, I think there's a governmental committee for the local Realtors Association. I'll try to figure out who that chairperson is for the committee and make them specifically aware.
They're gonna like it. I mean, that's the group I almost least worry about because they'll like the additional flexibility. I did get several comments after the News Gazette article, and it was so detailed that people were glad, because some would say, well, I don't really feel like I have to read the whole ordinance, because those were all the highlights in it that they personally were interested in.
okay.
So I think that's a good sign. The only people I sort of worry about are the people who don't want it, and what's the middle ground we can find to accommodate them. But I think we kept that in our discussion
Yeah.
the whole time and came to a pretty good
Yeah.
place.
Right. Okay. So, well, okay, closing public comment. That was the only one. And we just had a little discussion there. Are we feeling more discussion-y here? Have we talked about this enough? We feel like we're at a position that we send this on to city council and see what happens there? And if so, would someone like to make a motion after 9 months and send this recommended sent forward?
I'll make one comment. I think
Okay,
it
yeah.
looks great.
Yeah.
I don't want to change anything, but it was interesting, reading the definitions. And the only one that I thought we might get some comment on is on the accessory dwelling unit attached, because we say that for both of them that we want them to be, what's the wording? Well, not two persons, but that clearly incidental and subordinate to. And then, we made it less than 50%. I don't think it's for the attached only,
Right,
which
right.
I think we have enough safeguards in there being a, well, actually, that's not even a CUP, that's a by right. But I think having it be internal is not as big of a concern as
Mhm.
was once thought,
Yeah.
because it used to only be 25%.
Yeah.
So not that I want to change anything. It'll just be interesting to see if we get
Yeah.
any comments on that.
I move that we approve all right, hang on, the zoning ordinance amendment 2023-01, annual zoning ordinance amendments, accessory dwelling units as amended.
Second.
All right, we've got a motion that sounds like it covers the bases, right? And a second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? That feels great. Hey, Nardi, thank you. Oh my gosh, the work you two have done on this over the,
I know, it's
oh
remarkable.
my gosh.
Thank you.
So that is awesome. So that will be sent on and now it's Leslie and her friend's problem. City council. Okay. We now shall move on to other business. And so I'm talking about discussion November, December meeting schedule. And I guess maybe with that, Arnie, is that kind of part of what these housekeeping things are and what we're going to talk about in those meetings? So do you have something to say about A, or is that for
I
us?
do.
Yeah.
I'm asking if you want to hold a meeting on Thanksgiving Day,
Nope.
I-
or
Yeah.
if you want to hold a meeting a few days after Christmas, between Christmas and New Year's.
That,
This is a question you ask every year.
Yep.
so
And we could
The
do this
answer is
email.
That would be
normally
a
the
hard-
same, but I have to ask,
that'd be a hard no.
would you like to cancel the second meeting in November and the second meeting in December?
Yes, please.
Yes.
Yes, please.
Yes.
Yeah, I guess that has to be asked every year. Yes, thank you.
Unanimous. Okay.
Unanimous.
That also just helps us with schedules and people submitting
Right.
applications and just
Okay.
for us to know that timely.
And then zoning and planning report, if applicable, if you have anything for us.
For a zoning report, Max Ivankov did submit a cottage housing zoning text amendment.
Okay.
So that will be coming to you. It wasn't a complete application yet, but I do expect the complete application shortly. So that will put it onto your agenda. And separate item, Max also submitted a building permit application for lot number 21 in Weatherburn. You may recall that lot 21 was recently in a planned unit development and in a preliminary subdivision divided so that it could be sold half to one owner and half to the other owner. Something fell through, so he will likely be coming back to you because we cannot allow him to have a building permit for lot 21 when it is no longer on the PUD development concept plan because we got rid of lot 21. So at a minimum, even though the preliminary subdivision didn't come in as a final plat and wasn't approved, so that doesn't really need to be addressed. But the PUD and the diagram that goes with the plan unit development has to have lot 21 added back to it before he can go forward with the building permit for constructing something on lot 21. So while you thought we may have been done with Weatherburn, I'm not so sure that we are yet.
And just as a reminder, we don't have to get into it now, but there was an encroachment on that lot with that brick
The
wall.
Yeah.
There's some engineering that has to be figured out with that wall and how if a house goes back on it.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure that that's really an encroachment or because most of that was in the open space and some of it did
Oh,
come
okay.
on to lot 21 because the way the wedge occurred back
Yeah,
there.
right.
So it's unfortunate that was one of the first things that was constructed, the wall, in
Mhm.
addition to, it's not unfortunate that the duplexes were, that would be a horrible thing to say, but that the wall was put in and encroached onto a portion of another parcel
Yeah.
without forethought of what the implications are for that.
Okay.
The other slight hiccup is apparently there's something in the covenants and restrictions that also needs to be addressed by the homeowners association about retaining walls. So it's a question of whether or not they have to address that before he can come back and fix the PUD, but that's something that he needs to figure out.
Hmm.
So it's still complicated and we're still not done with Weatherburn. Moving on, I attended a regional housing study consortium meeting. It was the third group meeting and that was on October 5th. And as I understood it, the regional housing study appears to be on schedule for late spring, early summer of next year. That's something the CSPDC has been working on, not just for Rockbridge County, but for their entire region, which I think includes 5 counties, if I remember correctly. And the last item I have for you is a demolition permit was requested and issued, but not paid for yet for 201 North Randolph Street. You may recall that's the burnt out house that has been that way since February of 2016 up in the Diamond Hill, or technically the Green Hill neighborhood. That's all I have.
Good, thank you. So then we move on to C. And Cottage housing, you just mentioned, so that's gonna come up. And then what do we need to talk, what this,
It's up to you. We
Just come in with-
provided that in case you have had preliminary discussions on what your discussion timeline will be
Mhm.
for what we want to do next. Now that we know that cottage housing will likely be in a formal application that we need to address. And we didn't know how much time we were going to have on this agenda. So I know some of you have had thoughts on what you would like to sort of tackle next. So we provided that just as a indication of what was in the hot file.
Okay.
So unfortunately, even though we're in the 2021 annual text amendment, we probably fairly quickly need to at least think about another annual amendment that includes some, if not all of those items.
Yeah.
So that's more for discussion. We're not saying that all of those items need to be necessarily included, but just for your work plan to think
Okay.
about another annual text amendment.
okay. This wasn't in our packet, right? Cause I didn't, good, okay, good. I missed it if it was, okay. Cause so this is for us, for like homework for us to go through and think about which ones we want to tackle, right? And you'll tell us the ones that really need to be, right?
Yeah, I think that was that's how we've done it before.
Yeah.
We'd group the easy ones and then the ones that might be more difficult.
So are the housekeeping ones, are those the ones that we need to, and they should be fairly straightforward?
And again, this was just a quick and dirty writing down in
Yeah.
anticipation of a discussion
Oh, it's 2
It's
pages.
2 pages, yes.
of what you were of your plan going forward, your work plan.
Okay.
Yeah, these are good. You know, I would suggest too that we look at putting together guidelines for the entrance corridor. If we're going to start,
Yeah.
I don't think it's quite fair that we're already judging people on things when we don't even have a guideline and we haven't agreed to a guideline. So I think we need to do that sooner rather than later.
I think that that's also an important thing to do because we're going to have, I mean, not immediately, but as the development, the VDOT property, assuming that goes forward as planned, I suspect that there will be increasing numbers of businesses along South 11 or South Main. And so I think that having a better plan for that entrance corridor, I mean, in the comp plan, it talks about both East and West Nelson and North and South Main. So that seems like a good thing to be clearer on. But I think that there was a plan for that entrance corridor that included, I don't think it's a new thing to talk about brick on Nelson Street. I just, that happened a long time ago.
I don't think it's a plan we still follow, or at least I have not seen that. Yeah.
And that is what concerns me a little bit, is that hearing that there were standards about materials, and we have not brought that forward in our sign code that I'm aware of, or any other place in the entrance corridor, Article 6 as an example. So I need to find those and figure out what we have had in the past.
I think that would be great.
Yeah.
Because clearly we have, those are there. A lot of those are still there. And I think they, before those were there, that area was a much less pleasant place to be than it was after they put in that entrance corridor, sort of the guidelines. So it does really make a difference.
I have to say, I don't know if the entrance corridor, what you have sort of for loose guidelines is what was adopted, or if there actually is something more specific that says brick bases are required for a monument. So there may be something out there that may not have been brought forward in the not multitude, but in a number of amendments that we've done in the entrance corridor and for signs, and particularly in C2. So we'll take a look for that.
Or it may have just been a loose thing that
Yeah.
planning commissions, some members used and wasn't official.
Well, my memory is that there was a group of people, and Lee might be able to speak this better than I, but there was a group of people, they talked to all the business owners, and they made, sort of made an agreement together. And which I thought was also really great. Can I ask Lee? Could you come up to
Come on
this?
up, Lee, come on up.
A simple phone call to Bill Water would clarify if it ever got documented, or if it was staff's approach by consensus, working with all the property owners that they were working with at the time. So that question can be answered readily.
Thank you.
A question, would that apply to what? Well, so we don't, when we say entrance corridor requirements, does that apply to South Lexington, to South Main Street as well as East? Yeah, that's what you've raised before.
The C2, anything in the C2.
Yeah,
If I'm
okay.
think I understand correctly, the effort was along East Nelson Street.
That's
So I
right.
don't know
Yeah.
what's specific for East Nelson and if it also applied to South Main. Now, clearly the entrance corridor, or I'm going to call them loose standards, but the standards that we have in the 5 subgroups applied to both because it
Mhm.
specifically applies to anything that is in the C2 zoning district. And that occurs on South Main and East Nelson.
Well, that's what we had in, that's what we have in the strategies in the implementation chapter. Is to create an attractive gateway along South Main Street near Lee Highway, including the redevelopment of former VDOT. So that's well on its way with council's good work. I think what we're saying is there an opportunity to look at the wider picture now?
So at a minimum, we'll dig and call and see if there are specific standards that are already in place that we've either overlooked or we've just been lost in the shuffle. And I'm not sure how far you're going to get tonight with this discussion. So this is maybe more background for whenever you want to pick
Right.
it up again.
Right, yes.
And
I
Kate,
think
I
it-
would,
Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I think this should be a specific agenda item for us to focus on and just give our recommendations on what we think are priorities. I mean, give us time to discuss your list.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And anything else that we want to bring up.
So there's the work plan that you're looking forward in the sense that we know the cottage housing is likely going to be next.
Right.
And beyond that, annual amendments, and I'll always bring those to you sort of as a proposed list so that you can go through and jettison the ones that aren't necessary or not needed at this particular time for whatever reason. So yes, we can absolutely do that.
Yeah.
And then whenever you want to pick up, we're not going to change anything on the agenda unless you ask us to, because all of these can sort of come up in the other business category.
Yeah. But
Unless you specifically say on the first meeting in November or the first meeting in December, we want to discuss X, and then we'll add it to your agenda for you.
Yeah, I think, Arnie, that based on our experience now, some of these items will take a long time, as we know, and some of them are quick. But whenever we think it's going to be quick, it's not. So we have to be kind of, say, okay, this is what we want to get done this year. And you tell us, well, we're having the top 3 to address first are. That I think that would be helpful. And then if there are other ones that we want to suggest, so I was thinking today, is there anything that we can do to complement the green infrastructure report, which talked about street trees and, those kinds, are there ordinances or strategies within the implementation plan that we want to just have a quick look at and say, okay, if we need a zoning text amendment to help this move along, can we put that in the work plan? And we don't know which ones those are yet, but that's looking down the road. But in a way, this is saying, what is it that we want to accomplish in the next year? Because cottage housing will take us out to 23 for sure.
Right.
How is cottage housing? Could that be a 9-month thing or a 3-month thing? Yeah, Chief says.
Hard to tell. Luckily, and I said this about accessory dwelling units, so I'm loath to say it out loud. We already have a good template to go by because we have the example from Winchester. And we haven't, since it's been a while since we looked for cottage housing ordinances in Virginia. We need to go back and look again to see if there's any others. It would also be really helpful if they've actually built something so we could go up and take a look at it to see how it actually works.
Right.
So if we follow that template and if we realize that there's not going to be that much opportunity for these things, maybe we can work through it a little bit quicker. It's not going to be as applicable as accessory dwelling units because accessory dwelling units can apply to all of our residential zoning districts where it's going to be a little bit harder, particularly if we put in a minimum lot size kind of thing, and there's just not going to be as much opportunity for cottage housing.
Okay. All right.
So to the point that John just made, do we have in our, I haven't seen in our comp plan that we have priorities. Is that something that council set sort of like, okay, these are the most, I know that they're, on a schedule of short term,
Right, that was a
ongoing,
priority.
long term. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they're high priority or does it? I guess that's the question.
Mhm.
No, yeah, right.
No.
Not really.
Okay. And so we don't actually, council and planning commission did not set us a list of the top priority items. Is that correct?
Not quite. The first year we had the catalyst projects.
Right.
Those were the priorities. And then it's a matter of the annual review. So I think this is, in a way, that's what we're doing
That's what we're
now.
doing
That's
now.
what I'm
Yeah.
suggesting. We look
Yeah,
at
what are our next priorities?
and to, not to preempt you, but I definitely think that feedback from council on those priorities would be good.
I would really like to hear, I mean, if council could talk about that, just sort of say, do we have some priorities that we really want to address in the comp plan? That would be helpful.
And then kind of for us to then chew on here and work.
Yeah.
Yeah, it kind of goes both ways. I think they'll be interested in
What,
what you're planning on doing and to see
Then-
how much free time
Yeah.
we actually have. Yeah,
It's usually, it's easier to put something on paper and then say yes or no.
right.
Yeah. So the other question that I have is for you, Arnie. Are you tracking how we're doing with the implementation of the comp plan? And if so, could we get an update?
You can get an update somewhere back until about February or January this year. And I did get your email earlier today and I just haven't gotten through all the items or actually any of the items. And I cannot recall, and I was talking to Kate about it earlier today, in anticipation for something that council was going to do, and I cannot remember if it was the budget or the CIP, but at the beginning part of the year, I did go through quickly and put an extra column on the implementation. So you saw all the strategies in the implementation spreadsheet, and then we noted accomplished, working on, nothing done. Actually, we just left it blank. We didn't say. So we do have something that was quick and dirty, at least from my knowledge. I didn't pass it around to all the other department heads for them to tick off things. So those things that I was aware of. So we do have that, and we can update that fairly quickly too for the things that have been addressed since whenever I did that first part of the year, and now that's helpful to you.
I think that would be really helpful. I don't know what the rest of.
Maybe good just to wait till maybe December because it is
Sure.
helpful
Yeah.
for the CIP. And that's part of what, when we developed the comp plan, we were thinking it would revolve around the CIP
Sure.
as well, budget time,
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense.
just so they're not having to do it
Yeah,
multiple
of
times
course,
in
of
a year.
course.
Is the, I remember that we had a question that went into the form that department heads fill out. There was a request to add in there. How does this, is that in there now?
It is.
Okay,
I don't
great.
do requests for capital projects because
No,
my
yeah.
computer comes from IT. So there's nothing that I do, but yeah, we did add it. And not that I don't get to review, but it is on there that a marking or a line that says this meets strategy 27 of the housing chapter, so has been added.
We've been asked to help find strategies that
True. When because the other department heads aren't aware of or as attuned to the comp plan
Right.
as we are. So sometimes they do ask us, hey, we want to do this project, and then we'll go and look and find the strategy that closest fits that.
There is, Sorry, just one, you're bringing up a good point. We are, we are on year 4 of the comprehensive plan. And in year 5, we're supposed to update it. And.
Settle down
But
over there,
wait,
John.
wait,
We're busy here. Yes,
No,
so
no,
that
I-
will be
no,
part-
it's on the long finger.
Yes.
But it's just something to be thinking
Yes.
about, and I mentioned it to Arnie when I stopped by this week.
Yeah.
It's not something we have to do this year.
No.
But maybe there is some anticipation of what update would look like. So, for example, the housing is going to be updated with this new study.
Yeah.
So there's data and information that I don't think that the amendment, the update to the plan is going to be would be that extensive. It might be a thorough review of what had been done.
Yeah.
What do we want to keep?
Right.
And is there new information to add to it? I'm asking it because I think it should be painless and not something that we abruptly come to and say, we have to do it.
Right. And I think this will, what we were just talking about, will set us, as we get to the end of this calendar year, that will set us up going into the next year to start thinking those directions. And we are going to have to wait for the housing study. That'll be a big part of it, as you say. So yeah, that's good. That's a good point. And Lee has a question. We can take a question if you want to come up real fast and.
So just a point of information, I heard a report from the Rockbridge Conservation's representative on the Green Infrastructure Group that they're about to set their priorities amongst a whole array. So that should be coming in within the next month or two for you to roll into the council's prioritizations and your workload too. That helped.
Yeah, that's good. That's good to know.
Right. And
Thank you.
that's that coalition group.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm. Great.
Right.
Nothing there, but
Okay.
Arnie,
I add one other thing,
sure.
thinking ahead to the next meeting.
Yeah.
We have nothing else for the next meeting. Accessory dwelling units has been addressed. And if
Yeah.
if she submits something by Friday, then that will be the only thing. So I'm wondering about the agenda. So if
Okay.
Gia doesn't submit something, do we want to talk about what we're talking about in more depth and have that as the meeting? Or do you want to hold off on that until we have the first meeting in November potentially? So I'm just wondering, and it's a little bit dependent. Well, it's dependent on what you would like to do.
I think that's the kind of meeting that maybe we were looking for when we were talking about re-gearing up after we finish with this. So we probably should have a meeting even if there's no come back with the signs and hash this out, give us a chance to mull this over. And maybe you'll know more about the cottage housing proposal, maybe that'll be finalized. And so then how would we structure that conversation? Maybe, does that sound good? I mean, but how do we structure that conversation? How should we put it together for an agenda? What will our discussion look like? Or our homework be?
Yeah, I won't be here for that meeting.
Well, okay, then.
So
I think basically setting the calendar and priorities.
Yeah, so-
Priorities.
For basically going in the next year, because then we really don't have many, we only have two more meetings the rest of the year, right? One in November and one in December after that. So, yeah.
Well, it's an important thing to do, but in a way, it always gets pushed aside because of other things. So
So,
if we have filler time, let's fill it.
Yeah,
and
so let's-
and have the discussion.
okay. So
You can-
the goal of that meeting will be to hash out as
Provide
best we
input
can our priorities for the next
anytime.
year, half year.
And what we can do.
And is
for
there anything
you-
we can accomplish, anything we can get, are any of these simple enough that we could do in that meeting, right? You do think there's any of these that are these housekeeping ones or things that need to be tweaked that are simple enough that we can get done, or are these larger things?
These are all text amendments. So it's, do you want to put it on the list for immediate consideration or not? So we can do that review of, yes, it should go forward or it should not.
Okay, yeah, well,
The other thing that we can do, even though it's just mentioned that maybe we hold off until December, but I can also update the implementation. I'm gonna call it a matrix, but spreadsheet,
Mhm.
if you wanted to go through that. I know that you already have a couple of items in particular picked out, but I'm just trying to think of what we could provide
Yeah.
to you for that next discussion.
that would be good.
So those are two things. Even if I don't have it updated, at least you'll see all of the strategies all together on one spreadsheet, all 8 or 10 pages, whatever it is. So just having that in front of you might be helpful. So we can provide those two things,
Yes.
even if Gia doesn't come back with
Yes.
options.
Yes. Good. That sound like a plan? Good enough? We'll miss you though.
Yeah, well,
It'll be sad.
All right. Okay, so a conversation about a conversation we're gonna have. Say that. Okay,
that sounds.
does that get us through C?
Mhm.
That brings us to city council report.
So, the big items
Yes.
are, we approved the VDOT contract, sales contract, and we revised the Spotswood, and the only real modification of the Spotswood was to match up the timing so that they could do those projects in tandem with each other. And so within 4 years, that's the longest it could possibly take, but they're hoping to have it done sooner because it doesn't help them to invest this in the property and not get the project done sooner, but we should have some additional housing in the city.
Within 4 years
it'll-
from now.
Yes,
Mhm.
it would be the longest schedule.
Okay.
But and same as we talked about with Spotswood, there's no guarantees on their permitting or anything like that. It'll still go through all the
Mhm.
normal processes. So planning commission will see that. And since it was in the contract, that'll be a PDMU, a mixed use plan development for VDOT. So we'll be very involved in that then, based on the ordinance we drafted.
Is that time frame gonna overlap with the Main Street, the North Main Street construction?
It's hard to say. That target keeps changing.
Yeah. And,
That keeps getting pushed back, so we don't really know
Yeah.
when that's gonna happen.
and did did Echelon talk about how they'll handle traffic? I assume that there'll be sort of, construction traffic, but also, delayed traffic. Both, I'm on Taylor Street, so I'm like,
Oh, yeah.
so Pat and I will have this from either end.
Right.
And I'm just wondering if that was something that they,
Not at
you
this
all-
point. We haven't gotten anywhere near that far. It was just a matter of trying to
Yeah.
see if we could sell the property.
Yeah.
And the other thing that did come up in council, we were talking about the housing study, and Jim said it would probably be next summer before we see anything.
Okay.
We get some updates on it, but till we see the final product.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you. Well, there's number 8. Would anyone like to activate? Adjourn?
Motion to adjourn after a very successful.
Second.
All in favor?
I.
Aye, meeting adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Kate, Arnie, thank you very much. Public